Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here on this very exciting day as we kick off our 4th annual Local Author Fest, which is happening downstairs on the main floor, so please check it out on your way out. And we are so very excited to be welcoming Wheaton's very own New York Times bestselling author, Shelby Van Pelt, to her home library. So what we're going to do after Shelby talks, we'll have time for a brief Q&A session. And if you do have a question for Shelby, you can make a line right up here after she's done talking. And then we will do a book signing right over here. And if you don't have a copy of her book, she has generously brought some book plates to sign. So, and her paperback edition of Remarkably Bright Creatures is available for pre-order, so that'll be available soon. And we have a QR code to pre-order that from the bookstore of Glen Ellen. And before we begin, I'm very honored to introduce to you our Wheaton Public Library Board President, Lori Matanchik.
I brought some notes. I promise I'll keep it short. Courtney told me to keep it short. On behalf of the Library Board, I'd like to thank you all for being here. It's great to see everyone, and it's great to have so many local authors here today. We're really excited to have Shelby Van Pelt here. I read Remarkably Bright Creatures in December 2023. I checked it out here from the library, so I don't have a copy to sign today. I'm glad there are book plates available. I checked it out from here, and like you, I couldn't put it down. I read it in a day and a half, and ever since have recommended it to everybody I can think of to recommend it to. We're all book lovers here, and I appreciate it when a character really sticks with you, and long past the time that you've finished a book, you still remember the characters. And so I'd like to thank Shelby for giving us all Marcellus, who has, I think, stuck with all of us. I don't think any of us look at octopi the same way. To find out that Remarkably Bright Creatures was partially written here is a huge thrill, my home library. We're truly honored that the library played a small role in this, and wish you great success, continuing success. And speaking of honors, it's my honor to introduce our former mayor, our neighbor and longtime supporter of the Wheaton Public Library, Mike Grest.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. Mayor Phil, Mayor Cease is out of town, and he graciously recommended me for this job. And I said, unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, I'll give it a whirl. On behalf of the City of Wheaton, we are so proud and honored to not only have you had written part of your wildly successful debut novel here in Wheaton, but right here on the second floor. To commemorate your success and huge achievements, we want to present these 2 plaques to honor you. We have this plaque for you to take home. Where are we at? Here, thank you, Courtney. There we go. Please. We have this first plaque to honor you. Keepsake reminder that your community is here and supports you in all of your professional literary endeavors. We also have a plaque that we will be displaying here in the library as a reminder to all the patrons who visit that we have some really incredible talent here in Wheaton. And for that, any of us could be the next big selling author with a movie deal starring Sally Fields. No, I'm not kidding. Google it. Netflix is doing Shelby and Sally together for the first time. Yes. Now I'll hand it back to Courtney to get the program started. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you so much, Mayor Grest and Lori. And I also would like to recognize our fearless leader, the Executive Library Director, Betsy Adamowski, who is instrumental in pulling all of this together. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest of honor, Shelby Van Pelt. When Shelby isn't writing or traveling the country talking about her fabulous best-selling book, she's herding cats and wrangling children. Her debut novel, Remarkably Bright Creatures, was an instant New York Times bestseller and a Read with Jenna Today Show book club pick. In 2023, she was awarded the Heartland Prize for Fiction and the McLaughlin Esmond Stearns First Novel Prize from the Writers' Center. Remarkably Bright Creatures has sold over 2 million copies, I'm sure more than that since this was written. It has spent in aggregate over a year on the New York Times hardcover bestseller list. Born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, she's now missing the mountains here in Wheaton with her family. Let's give a huge round of applause, Wheaton round of applause for Shelby Van Pelt.
All right, step one, we have to turn the mic on. Have we been successful? Yes. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for coming out today on this beautiful, finally feels like spring day here. It was a real tough commute for me to drive 5 minutes down Main Street to get here. And I appreciate you all doing the same. A couple things I want to just say before we launch into talking about the writing of this book and the sort of very hyper-local story that led to it. So today is also Independent Bookstore Day, which some of you may know. It's been all over my social media. I'm actually going to go head over to Bookstore of Glen Ellen after this and get some books for my kids. I would really, if you have it in you, encourage you to, if today or any day, just support our local bookstores. When people ask sometimes how do you get a novel that sells 2 million copies? Truthfully, the answer is I don't know. And my publishers, I feel like, don't even really fully understand the story. But I know that a huge part of that story is independent booksellers, librarians, folks recommending this book, kind of hand selling it, hand recommending it to people. And that, I would not be here if not for independent bookstores. So give some love to Bookstore of Glen Ellen, to Anderson's down in Naperville, to Harvey's Tales out in Geneva. They're all just great places and great community centers. Libraries and bookstores, those are the two places you can kind of go in any town and find just really great people. And the second thing, since we are here for our local author festival, and I am a local author, obviously, there are a lot of other really great local authors downstairs, and I hope that you all have the chance to go spend some time with them, learn about their work. In honor of this festival, I have some exclusive Remarkably Bright Creatures merch. This is actually today is the merch launch. This is the first time these are out in the world. They are little stickers. There's one that said, my 11-year-old daughter drew this octopus. There's one that says smart cookie. There's one that says darkness suits me, first line of the book. And there's one that says, you are only human after all. And I will be giving these out today. I would love to give them, for every sticker that you take, I want you to find a new favorite author downstairs and buy one of their books. So if you take one sticker, you're going to go find one book, 2 or 3. But really just I remember when I moved here seeing local author festival and thinking gosh, I would love to have a table at that someday. And now I'm up here giving a keynote for it. But everyone kind of starts somewhere. So definitely spend some time downstairs, get to know those folks, and maybe next year one of them will be up here speaking to you guys. So normally when I give a talk about this book, I sort of go through the history of how it came about. It started back in 2013 when I went down a YouTube rabbit hole and became kind of obsessed with captive octopuses and the naughty things that they do in tanks and in aquariums and somewhat in the wild as well. And there's a whole kind of story of how I came to decide to write a book about it. I'm not really trained as an author. I don't have an MFA. I wasn't even an English major. I had a whole other career before I did this. I didn't write any fiction until I was well into my 30s. And basically it boils down to I was kind of trying to teach myself how to write fiction when I found this octopus idea and was kind of okay, I think that's the voice I want to write. But it took many, many years of sort of writing some little tidbits of things and then picking it up and putting it down. And I didn't really get going on it until I came here. And so I want to fast forward through a little bit of what I would normally talk about and talk about the part of it that happened here. We moved to Wheaton in 2018. We had been living in Atlanta, which is where I sort of started this book. I spent a lot of time at the Georgia Aquarium in the early stages of writing this. We moved from Atlanta to here. My kids were both young toddlers at the time. My husband grew up in Geneva. Grandparents were here, family was here. It was the right move for us to be closer to his roots and to family. I want to say, it wasn't really a coin flip, but it's like, well, are we going to move to Seattle or Chicago? And Chicago won. But yeah, so we came here in 2018. My youngest was 2, and he went into preschool. And I found myself with some time that I had not had previously. And I had been working on this book off and on for a few years. I had sort of never managed to get past the first couple chapters. I would just, write kind of the first act of the book. And then I wouldn't really know what to do, so I would just go back to the beginning and keep writing, the first chapters over and over again, polishing them up. But 2018 rolls around and I'm like, okay, I think I want to get back into this writing thing. I've been kind of out of it for a little while. I had young kids and moving and chaos, and I would drop my kids off at preschool, and then I would come and I would sit in that table over there, overlooking Adams Park, and write. What was I writing? I wasn't writing really Remarkably Bright Creatures yet. In 2018, I decided to sign up for a short story contest. This was going to be I'm going to get back into writing and, just find my voice again. And I sat at that table over there. It was a prompted contest. And so they give you a genre and 2 prompts, and you have to write a story in this genre that includes both of these characters, subjects, items, whatever. And I was assigned crime caper was my genre. I didn't even know what a crime caper was. It's like Ocean's 11. It's a heist, right? Where the criminals are kind of the good guys almost. And the 2 objects were a bicycle, okay, fair enough, and a blood drive. But blood drive was hyphenated in the prompt. And so I'm like, well, do they mean a Red Cross event, or bloodthirsty, like a vampire blood drive? So I decided I would write a book that incorporated both of those things. Not a book, a story. And I got curious this morning and went to dig this story up, thinking I might read it to you guys, but no. It's embarrassing. I will read you the synopsis, because you had to have a synopsis for this. But I sat at that table over there. This was my big re-entry into writing, and I wrote a novel that takes place, or a short story that takes place in an aquarium. It is called The Cat Sharks. Here's the brief synopsis. Gemma is a little shark with big dreams and big plans to break free, along with her siblings, from the sideshow aquarium and the dingy boardwalk arcade that's always been home. But when an unplanned encounter with spilled blood turns the rest of her crew mad, will she hang on to her wits, or will she succumb to her senses and have just one little taste? It's awful. I mean, it's not, but it's like, yeah, we all truly do start somewhere. This was my big re-entry into writing. The story got an honorable mention somehow in this round of the contest, and then I said, okay, that was okay. I'm going to try writing some more. I tried picking my long neglected book back up a few times, and it kind of didn't make a lot of progress. It was kind of the same old story. I'm just kind of spinning my wheels. In 2018, I decided to do something called NaNoWriMo. Is anyone familiar with this? It's National Novel Writing Month. I don't think it's around anymore, but it was every November you would be challenged. It's just like an online challenge to write 50,000 words in the month of November. And so I thought, okay, I'm spinning my wheels on my novel. I'm going to put that aside and write this total other thing, and maybe I'll just finish something. I don't think I've ever talked about this at a book event, by the way. And I wrote this. I sat again at that table and wrote 50,000 words of something. That is not a novel. There was no plot. But it was instructive, because here's what I kept doing, and it's something that I had to learn not to do when I finally got around to finishing Remarkably Bright Creatures. I would add characters in, and then I wasn't sure what would happen plot-wise, so I would just keep adding more characters in. And so I had a 50,000 words, which is about half of a typical book, and it was just like a pileup of characters. Like literally picture like a freeway, like car accident, and like cars just keep piling onto the back. It was like that. So that sits in a drawer somewhere and probably will never see the light of day. But it was a learning process, and in 2019, after doing that, I started working in earnest on Remarkably Bright Creatures again. And same kind of pattern, I would drop my kids off at school. My son started staying like all day at school, which was great. So I could have like several hours of sitting at that table writing. Through all the seasons, I can picture how the leaves look out there in winter, spring, summer, and fall. I have very strong opinions on the various tables and the quality of them. If anyone is interested, I can certainly talk about that for a while. But yeah, so I started working on the book again in 2019. And I kind of got stuck again. I ended up going back down to Atlanta to meet with my critique partners, and we were doing like a weekend writing retreat. We rented an Airbnb, and we were writing during the day and drinking wine at night. It was like heaven. And they kind of started giving me a hard time for not having finished my book yet. And so one other woman and I made this pact that we were going to finish our books. And we had a weekly schedule, and we had 10,000 words a week, like, which quickly became like 5,000 words a week, which then became like just any words a week. Any progress is good progress, like, but we had it, kind of mapped out to stay on track to actually finish our books. And we made it through the holidays. Thanksgiving, we made it through Christmas. We were sitting there on like New Year's Day of 2020, sort of patting ourselves on the back that we had like kept our writing schedule intact after our kids were home for like 10 whole days from school. Like, yay, we can do anything. Like 2020 is gonna be our best year ever. And of course it was not for so many of us. And the pandemic truly did end my love affair with that table back there. And it hasn't quite been the same since, I will say, mostly because when I come in here now, I get distracted talking to all of the wonderful staff people that are hanging around because they know me now. But I spend a lot of time here with my kids. The wrangling children part of that bio, a lot of that wrangling is done in this building. So, but I finished my book in 2020. There's no way that I would have finished it if I hadn't had that existing sort of accountability structure and really just like set of deadlines because I was cramming it in during COVID. I was writing at night. I was often, instead of writing from like 9 until 3 at that table, I was writing from 9 p.m. until 3 a.m. Because that was the only time that the house was really quiet and I wasn't going to get interrupted. And my husband wasn't on Zoom, on speakerphone, like walking around the house because we didn't have a home office. So I finished it in the summer of 2020. And in the summer of 2020, there was something else octopus related that happened, and that was the documentary My Octopus Teacher that came out. And it truly, I guess I can tell my octopus teacher story, and it's not my favorite story. It does not make me look very good, but I remember I had just finished my book, and or my manuscript rather. I was getting ready to query it out to agents, which is like a really scary thing. You can probably ask some of the folks downstairs about this also, because it's like one of the most kind of like tender moments of the whole process. You're putting your work out there and you're bracing for the rejection, and you know that the rejection is gonna come. Or even worse than the rejection is just like the silence from agents. You send out your thing that you've poured your heart and soul into the world, and you just hear either no or you hear nothing. So I'm getting ready to do that. I'm feeling kind of anxious about it. And I'm in my kitchen. and the Netflix is on in the other room. I think my kids watched like 10 hours of Netflix a day in 2020. And I hear the trailer for this thing where it's like, a brilliant story of friendship between a human and an octopus, like a remarkable exploration of how nature and people connect, and like a story of tragedy and loss, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, they took my book. How did they do that? Like, how did they know? And I sat down on my kitchen floor at my house in North Wheaton, and I cried because I was like, it's over. Like, someone stole the idea. How did Netflix do it? Did they hack into our Wi-Fi? Like, I don't know. Obviously, that was not the case. But I think every author, maybe every artist, you just have this like deep-seated fear in you that nothing you're doing is actually original, right? Like, you've got a doppelganger out there that's going to do the same thing as you, and they're going to do it better, and they're going to do it faster. They're going to beat you to market, and like, everything you're doing is just a waste of time. It's really, we're not very kind to ourselves, we authors, when we talk to ourselves. But so I thought that was what had happened. But when I actually went and watched my octopus teacher, I realized, oh, maybe this isn't a bad thing. Like, maybe this is a good thing. And like, yes, it was a very, very good thing. Right as my book was landing on agents' desks, my octopus teacher had gone kind of viral. I feel like our pop culture was all really concentrated back in the pandemic years. Like, I feel like it was like, oh, like the Tiger King and the octopus guy, like everyone's talking about it. And so that was the environment into which my manuscript was landing on their desks, was like, here's a fiction version of this thing that's blowing up on Netflix. And if there's anything that publishers like, it is like some degree of certainty, right? Like that, hey, this is a proven, even though it's on one level, the most fundamentally weird thing that had probably crossed their desks in a while, there was a precedent for it with this Netflix thing. So I actually got an agent really quickly, and we ended up going out to auction with all the major publishers, 5-way auction, which was incredible. And I'll talk a little bit about the Netflix movie, because now I've got my own Netflix story, because they are making a movie of it, which they didn't need to hack into my Wi-Fi to make. But yeah, so that's kind of the story of how it got from eventually started in Atlanta to that desk over there, to me standing here giving a speech to you on Local Authors Day. I do want to talk a little bit about some of the characters in the book and how they came about, because I always get a lot of questions about that too. And people often ask, like, well, do you write real people into your books? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, the answer is yes. Normally I try to you change the names a little bit so it's not super obvious, but I wrote a lot of my grandmother into this book. My grandma is the Anna to whom the book is dedicated, and I remember being in this space where it was early in the process. I had written a bunch of the Marcellus scenes, but that was kind of it. I had just this collection of an octopus's journal entries. And when I was thinking about if I want to make this into a book, how do I do that? No one is going to read an entire book that is just an octopus giving hot takes about things. Although I have met people that would read that book. Oh my gosh. Octopuses are just having a moment. So I knew I needed to get human characters in. But I always think well, how are the characters going to be related, right? What is going to bond them together? And I think that the thing that bonds together, Marcellus and Tova, is the fact that they're both stuck. I was spending all this time in aquariums, in the Georgia Aquarium and other aquariums, trying to figure out who this octopus character was. And I think just the idea of animals in cages or sea creatures in tanks that are kind of just circling around doing the same thing over and over again, 24 hours a day. Really, I started thinking about how humans do that too. I feel like I watched my grandmother do that. I grew up next door to her. We were really close when I was a kid. I would kind of shadow her around her house when she was doing her weekly routine. She loved cleaning. Oh my gosh, she would clean her house, then she would come next door and clean my house. And now as an adult with my own kids, that must have been awesome for my mom, right? Her mom comes and cleans her house. Like, no, I have to pay someone to do that at my house, or just watch it not get done because I'm not doing it. I did not inherit the cleaning gene. But I watched her sort of have these routines, right, where it would be like pretty rigid. Like, okay, every Monday, I do my baseboards. Every Tuesday, I clean the oven. Every Wednesday, we do the linens. And I would kind of be following her around, helping her. And I remember watching her strip her guest bed of its sheets and wash them and hang them to dry and iron them and then put them back on, her neat little corners. And like no one had slept in the bed since she did it the week before. And I remember asking her, like, why are you doing something that doesn't need to be done, Grandma? Like, this is unnecessary. And she would always say, like, oh, well, it's something to do. And I think that is the character of Tova in a nutshell, is like, oh, it's something to do. She has to stay in motion. She has to keep busy. She is like one of those, sharks that is circling an aquarium tank, or stingray or a turtle that just has to kind of keep going because that's the path that they're on. But of course, characters in books wouldn't be much fun if they didn't have to grow and change. And so, Tova's sort of assignment is that, and she knows this, life is going to change, and she's going to have to break out of those routines and those norms and get uncomfortable with some things in her life in order to move forward. And then the character of Cameron, sometimes people ask where he came from. His origin story, so originally, I kind of imagined him as like the villain of the story. And this was mostly because I didn't really know how to write a book. And so I was like kind of just trying to follow like these outlines I had found online of like, oh, every story has like a hero and a villain. And like, okay, Tova's my hero. So who's going to be the villain? It's not Marcellus, obviously. He's just kind of the narrator. And so I started writing this Cameron character thinking he was going to be like the bad guy. But that did not last long because I'm like, I can't really make him a bad guy. Like, he's not a bad guy. He's like that guy. It's like, I've dated this guy. Like, I think every friend group, every family group, everyone, they all have a Cameron in them. This person that is just sort of, you love them, but you're so frustrated by them. And they keep kind of getting in their own way. And you just kind of want to like shake them and be like, just get out of your own way, man. I have often said, if you think that your friend group or your family doesn't have this person, then it's probably you. And I think I have been this person before. This was a lot of me in my 20s into Cameron. Just kind of the false starts and the failure to launch and the roughness that can be come along with becoming a fully formed adult. So that was another character's. Sometimes people ask where Ethan came from. I plagiarized Ethan from a short story that I wrote, not a cat shark short story, a different one, but for the same contest, actually, the same, like, they have, these various different ones all throughout the year. So it was the same organization that put on a different contest. And I think it was a flash fiction. And I wrote, somehow I had like this character who was like a Scottish guy who ran a grocery store. And, I put it aside. And then when I needed someone to, my characters always find themselves needing someone to kind of talk to. And so I kind of, I'm playing matchmaker a lot. I thought, who would Tova like to talk to? Oh, she could talk to Ethan, the guy from that story. So I brought him right in. The chapter that is the first chapter that's sort of from his point of view actually is kind of like verbatim. A lot of it was that flash fiction piece. And the Nitwits. Tova has a group of friends called the Nitwits. My grandmother had a group of friends called the Nitwits. I stole it directly from real life. I don't normally do that, I promise. I do normally change the names. But I had to keep the name the Nitwits because it was just too good. And I think if any of them are still with us, they would be over 100 years old by now. This is my little weird fantasy about book events. I really would love to see a hand go up in the back sometime and have it be like, I was a nitwit. Be like, yeah. But, just as time ticks on, obviously the likelihood of that it becomes less and less. But yes, this was something I took directly from my grandmother's life. Like I said, I spent so much time with her, and I would be over at her house when she had her nitwit ladies over, and they didn't do any knitting, and they drank a lot of tea and a lot of coffee. Occasionally, if it was the afternoon, they might make a Greyhound. And watching them gossip, these ladies, And the shape of my grandmother's mouth, I can still see it. That would just be like, like, you know, she did not want the gossip in her house. So yeah, a lot of those dynamics I pulled directly from her life. But it was a lot of fun to write. And sometimes I wish I could go back to the place where I was sitting over at the table over there writing this, because now I'm trying to write a second book, and it is so different. I don't want to say it's better or worse, it's just very different. I've heard from a lot of authors that are more advanced along their career path than I am, that your second book is your hardest book. And that is, I think, particularly true when you have a first book that has been successful, because now you're writing into a set of expectations. Now you're writing in the shadow of something big, big and like octopus shaped in my case, a truly giant Pacific shadow over my book. I mean, it's a great thing, but it's so different. When I was writing Remarkably Bright Creatures, I never thought anyone would read it. Like, not really, you know, I hoped, obviously, that I would, you know, land a book deal and end up on the New York Times bestseller list, but it was a pipe dream, really. You know, I knew my husband would read it and my critique partners, but there is a freedom in just writing kind of what you want to write. Especially when you have something as ridiculous as a sentient octopus narrator. It doesn't matter if it's weird, right? Because I'm just writing it to kind of like entertain myself, and, you know, I'm not really worried about, is this going to be kind of too much? Is it too unbelievable? Is it too weird? Didn't care, was just writing it for myself. And now that I'm trying to write a second book, I have to really work hard to push those thoughts away. I feel like I have to divide my brain sometimes into like a brain that is, you know, that knows how the sausage is made, that knows what kind of questions you get at book events, that knows what reviewers say, that knows all of the marketing that goes into a book, the thoughts of where does it sit on the shelf, who is the right reader for this, who are we going to get to blurb it, all of those things. If I start thinking too much about those when I'm drafting, it becomes very difficult to write anything. And I sometimes find myself, you know, trying to write into that framework, right? Like, you're writing a draft and you're thinking like, well, what are the blurbers gonna say? Like, no, that's not helpful. So I've struggled with it a little bit. It's maybe, I don't know, it's probably half done. It has an animal, but it's not an octopus, because I know someone's gonna ask. And I hope to be able to, you know, get it finished and share more about it soon, but that's my big kind of struggle right now, in addition to leaving on Monday to go on book tour for the paperback. So that's pretty cool. And the other thing that's kept me busy is the Netflix movie, which is super exciting. Yes, Sally Fields is playing Tova. I got to go out to the set where they were filming in Vancouver a couple weeks ago. They actually just wrapped filming, so they had their wrap party last week. But I got to spend a week on set and watched all of the scenes. There were scenes being filmed with Tova and Cameron and Ethan that week. And so I got to meet all three of those actors and watch a bunch of the scenes that they were doing. And I wasn't really sure what to expect. It's okay. I wasn't sure what to expect of a movie set, because I'd never been on one. Part of me thought like they were just gonna kind of bring me there and kind of like, you know, walk me around and be like, well, this is that. I'm like, no, I got there, they're like, here's your headset, like, here's your director's chair, like, you are going to earn that executive producer credit we've given you. And it was great, you know, being able to weigh in on you know, just even sometimes like the tone or like an extra word added or deleted that someone might say, how it can kind of change the meaning of a particular line of dialogue or whatever, and getting to sort of be a part of that was really cool. They have not cast Marcellus yet. That is coming later. It's probably one of the last things they'll do, because they need to get the pictures, the actual footage, kind of finalized before because it's all voiceover. So the Marcellus voice will be a voiceover. I have my opinions on who it should be. A lot of you might have opinions on who it should be. I'm happy to hear them, but know that I have no power. I have the executive producer credit, but they don't actually have to listen to anything that I suggest or say. So that's been kind of the journey of this book. Do we want to do some Q&A? Yeah? If no one has any questions or anything, I will just tell octopus jokes up here. So. How do we want to have folks come up?
Line up, yeah.
All right, tell us an octopus joke now.
Okay. Here's my very, very PG octopus joke. Why did the octopus blush? Because it saw the sea bottom. Yeah. It's a little butt joke for us. All right, yeah, okay. If you come up to the mic if you have a question. We're getting it figured out.
All right, so I have to say, I have one thing. I work at the youth services department downstairs.
Yes, I recognize you.
Okay, we have a couple of books, Octopus Escapes and Inky the Octopus. They've been off the shelf. Like they have not been on the shelf for months since your books come out and gotten really popular. So that's pretty cool, I thought.
That's amazing.
So my question is, like, to your point, like, who do you think should do Marcellus's voice?
Okay. So did anyone here listen to the audiobook? A couple people? Yeah, a few people. In the audiobook, Marcellus's voice is read by the actor Michael Urie. He was on Ugly Betty. He's in Shrinking, the Apple show. He is the snarky lawyer friend on Shrinking. And I think he did a phenomenal job. He has a built-in fan base, I feel like, from audiobook people already. I have recommended that they reach out to him. Again, they don't really listen to most of what I say. Who else has been floated? I think Morgan Freeman has been floated. Nick Offerman has been floated. But again, these are all just who knows ideas, right? Do not quote me on any of that.
So speaking of the audiobook, your audiobook made me fall in love with audiobooks. The characters, the voices, they did a great job. Do you have a hand in all of that, in selecting who reads? That's my question.
A little bit. So yeah, when you do a traditionally published book, certain things like the title, the cover, the audiobook, all of those are the publisher's say, really. And so they can change your title. They can decide what kind of cover you want. They could do your audiobook a way that you don't want. I feel like I have been really lucky that my publisher has been super collaborative on all of those things. And I do remember they sent me a list. This was before publication. They were getting ready to do the audiobook production. And they sent me a list, 2 lists actually, male narrators for Marcellus ideas and female narrators for the rest of the book, just ideas. And they said, hey, go listen to samples of their stuff and tell us who's your favorite, and we'll try to get those people. And so I went out and listened to all of them. Marin Ireland was my favorite, and she was the one who eventually came on board and did most of the narration for this. Michael Urie was my favorite, and he I don't know why either of these people agreed to do this. I mean, it's a debut novel about an octopus, and they were just sure. I'm I don't know, needed the rent due that month or something? I don't know. Because they're both really, really accomplished in their fields. But here's my other Michael Urie story, which I think is funny. Has anyone here read books by Stephen Rowley? He does The Guncle, The Celebrants, yes. And he wrote a book called Lily and the Octopus, which is, I think, over there on the shelf. It's a very different type of octopus in Stephen's book. It's a metaphorical octopus, and it's a hilarious book, but also a sad book. But he had Michael Urie do the narration for that book, and that was the sample that I listened to. So I'm okay, this guy already has been an octopus. This is great. I have had a chance to meet Stephen Rowley a couple times. He's fantastic in person. He's so nice. And we have a running joke now that we're trying to typecast Michael Urie as an octopus, because he's done it twice. If he pops up doing another audiobook narration with an octopus, then I'm going to just assume that's his kink or something. I don't know.
Hi, a couple months ago, an octopus named Zeke escaped from an aquarium in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So had you heard of any octopi who had done that before you created Marcellus?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that was part of your research, that this is a typical behavior?
Yeah. So here was my research. Early on, it was a lot of watching YouTube videos. And literally, I mean, there are YouTubes of octopuses escaping. There are YouTubes of octopuses like shooting water and like blowing the electricity out of the building because the light was annoying them. I mean, there's all this bad behavior that has been documented in videos, and there's even more of it now than there was, several years ago when I was kind of first starting with this character. So that was sort of the early research. When I finally got the book done and was actually seriously considering sending it out to agents, I had this moment where I was like, okay, I gotta make sure that this octopus stuff actually works. Because this is gonna go out into the world, and if this actually gets published, somewhere a marine biologist is gonna be mad at me if I didn't get it right. So I had a friend who is a marine biologist read it, and she put me in touch with some other folks who do octopus rescue in Alaska, and I had them read some sections of it, and I had some really weird specific questions for them, which they answered. And this was during COVID, so we're all in our living rooms having these weird conversations about can an octopus operate a photocopier? They're like, no, it cannot. But it was really important to me that everything Marcellus is doing in the book in terms of interacting with his physical world is possible for an octopus to do, and in most cases, there's some documented evidence of them doing that. So, escaping from an opening that is really, really small, they do that. The only hard thing in their body is their little beak on their underside, and so as long as that beak can fit through the hole, then the octopus can fit through the hole because they're just like a jelly. They collect things. They do this both in captivity and in the wild. They will have a little collection in their den of shiny things. They have distinct personalities and really clear preferences for some people over other people. They play favorites big time. I got to meet an octopus around the time that the book was published. I got to have my moment. I was going to have my Tova moment, and it wasn't because this octopus didn't like me. Squirted water at me. But yeah, and then right after its normal handler aquarium person was there, was oh, all over your arm, oh yeah, and then I come over and it's sorry. So yeah, that the research had kind of those two phases, sort of the more online phase, and then just a really careful combing through of all the details to make sure that it actually worked scientifically.
I have a question about how you made the jump from short story writing to novel writing.
Yeah.
I write a lot of short stories myself, and I kind of fear novel writing because I feel like I'll get burnt out on my own narrative.
Yeah,
I'm just
same.
curious how you made that jump.
Yeah, no, I totally feel the same way. And it is, I do get burned out sometimes. It's, I feel like I take a lot from my own short stories and put them into books. And sometimes when I'm writing a certain section or certain chapter, I almost feel like I'm writing a flash fiction or something. So I'm okay, I'm just gonna do this scene. I don't know where it's going to go in the book. I know the characters who are involved, and I know kind of what's happening. But I might not understand where it fits into the larger plot scheme. And it maybe doesn't. I wrote a lot of stuff that had to get cut. But yeah, I think for me, when I get kind of stuck or frustrated, I try to think of myself as writing a short story instead of, panicking about where is this going to fit in the broader plot? How am I going to, I just sat there and it took me, I'm a slow writer. And so sometimes I'll be oh my gosh, it just took me 3 hours to write 1,000 words. And then you start doing the math and you're I have to get to 100,000 words. And it's really daunting. But yeah, I think for me, I try to just think of it as little bits and pieces of things. I can always kind of stitch it together on the edit. I can smooth it out on the edit, and just try to get something on the page, even if it's not in the right order. So because I skip around a lot too. I don't necessarily write from the front of the book to the back.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. I would love to read some of your short stories. Hi.
I am not a nitwit, but I am a litwit. That is the name of our book club. And
That's amazing.
Yep, and we read your book for one of our meetings, and everybody really enjoyed it. So I'm really glad that you brought up My Octopus Teacher, because that really, seeing that documentary made this very real and plausible for me. I came with my mom, and after we read it for book club, I said, "Mom, you have to read this book. It's a great book." I was explaining it to her, and she's like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not really into fantasy." I'm like, no, you've got it all wrong. But anyway, so back to the book club. One of the themes, that's pretty strong in the book is kind of loss, and we also talked a lot about the impact of keeping secrets. Are there any other themes that you really hope that people or book clubs would be picking up on or discussing?
Yeah, definitely loneliness. Which maybe is another side of that coin of loss, certainly for the characters in the book. This sort of stuckness, which again, these are not necessarily distinct themes, but just kind of maybe different shades of the same color here. The idea that it is never too late to do something. In Marcellus's case, we find out on the first page of the book that he's like basically at the end of his lifespan. And yet he has a whole character arc from there. Like, he grows and changes. It's not too late. He doesn't have to be resigned to that fate. And then like kind of the grief and loss is